Hey guys, it's Monday about 1:44. Kind of weird considering I called off school without a real hurricane being here just yet. But we'll not complain. It's still a day off. More sleep. All right. This is part three of our summarization of Civil War. As I posted in Edmodo, your test will not include Reconstruction. We'll go ahead and move that to the next um, unit. We'll still keep on with our schedule as best as possible, but we'll go ahead and move that to the next unit. We want to talk about Lincoln's wartime presidency. All right. As president, Lincoln asserted his authority in many different ways, and it needs to be known that Lincoln pretty much set the standard for presidents when it comes to wartime. Um, his authority and authoritativeness towards his generals and Congress are going to be a leading example for many presidents to follow during war. All right, but the couple things that he did, and I just kind of listed here. You have the Conscription Act, instituting the draft, habeas corpus. One of the first people that they're going to use this on is actually Francis Scott Key's nephew, who ironically will be held prisoner at Fort McHenry, the same place where his uncle wrote the Star Spangled Banner. All right. He also institutes martial law throughout the state of Maryland. You have the border states. The occupation of the military throughout the South. Because he kind of gets himself in a little bit of trouble by declaring or not declaring war. Because again, by not declaring war in the South, he's saying that the South isn't necessarily isn't necessarily separate from the Union. Right now, they're just being rebellious. But then he goes ahead and uses the military in very strong fashion in many different ways. And a lot of people are going to say that his use of the military to get things done is unconstitutional itself. So he does assert his authority, and you might have many other examples as well. All right. But when we talk about people and the things that they in opposition against Lincoln, understand that the Peace Democrats, or the Copperheads, very important term there, are going to be the leading group of opposition. In 1864 election, during the war, they're going to nominate George McClellan, the fired general, to run against Lincoln. And their whole thing is that they're going to end the war with peace and allow the South to separate. And these are Democrats, and there's not many of these left, but they're going to be vocal as much as possible. Also, you're going to have other Southern sympathizers throughout the North who kind of want to see the war end, and they too will oppose Lincoln. You have those who support slavery, or maybe the racists. They also are in opposition. Things like that. There's people who are going to be against the use of blacks in the military. So there's all sorts of groups of people who oppose Lincoln during the war. Now, one of the most important pieces of paper ever written is going to be the Emancipation Proclamation. I think everybody has an idea what it is. Republicans are going to disagree on slavery basically in terms of gradual versus immediate. It's not that there are Republicans in the North that don't think slavery should be gone. They just want to see it gradually done, while others, the radicals, are going to want to see it immediately done. All right. So you have, when we talk about gradual versus uh, immediate, we could also look at them as the moderates versus radicals. Okay. Um, when the Emancipation Proclamation, it wasn't like a surprising document, considering that Lincoln had been building up to this point throughout the whole time. In fact, the use of the Confiscation Acts, that is a good precursor to the Emancipation Proclamation. All right, because what they eventually did was they took land from their enemies, as well as freed the slaves. to be used by the North in battle. All right, so it wasn't like a shock that they did it, that he passed the Emancipation Act. There were some signs to it. All right, now how did the Emancipation Proclamation change the climate of the war? This is probably the most important question that there is. All right, that one right there. Understand it changes the focus for Northerners. Instead of fighting to maintain the Union, now the North, will fight to free the slaves. So it gives a moral clause to fighting. All right, or more cause or clause, when you think about it, because many of the Northerners don't really care so much about the Union because they're either focused A on making money through industrialization, or B they're just focused more on their own individual states, and that's still the way it is in America. All right, but by using the moral issue of slavery, that's going to really draw on a number of people. And it's also going to get the support of Europeans, all right? Because the British, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the British are going to be kind of divided on whether or not to support the South or to stay out of it. I think this is one of the things, one of the factors that's going to allow them to stay out of it and not to support the South, all right? Right. Also, it also is going to cause a lot of fear for Southerners. Okay, a lot of women. You want to get a war society to go against war. Play on the safety and the livelihoods of the people at home, such as the women and the planners and such. They feared a rebellion. Okay, and that's going to have an impact on their success. Now, what's misleading about the Emancipation Proclamation? It only freed the slaves in the Confederacy, not the border states. Alright. That's a little misleading because obviously he doesn't want to rock the boat with his border states. He doesn't want to tip the hand to the South. And so therefore he's going to leave them alone. Alright. We'll talk about impacts that it's going to have. Obviously, increases the Union's forces by allowing blacks to fight. It creates fear in Southern society. Okay? Now, talking about the roles of women, and just kind of finishing up here. Understand one of the things it does, and it gives women more power over the household than ever before. These women in charge of the farms. Women take up a new profession, or somewhat new profession for themselves. That's nursing. All right, you have people like Claire Barton and such. And ultimately leads to the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. Okay? Diplomacy. Now, when it comes to other countries and their support for the South, understand that the ruling classes of Europe are very aristocratic, I guess that's how you spell it, in nature, just as the South. So the rich and the elite in England and France are going to support the South because they live very similar lives. All right, the South is very aristocratic. The plainer elites and such. You know, it's just not by blood. But when we talk about why does Europe not make an impact for the South and King Cotton, there's a couple of reasons. One, people of Europe are anti-slavery. Um, so therefore the people of England, for example, were very much in support of the North because of the fact that they were against slavery. All right. Even though the ruling class of England and France might support slavery, they know they're not going to get the support of the population. Two, they didn't think the South would win, especially after the battles of Antietam and Gettysburg. I mentioned earlier that the South could have won the war if they had not tried to invade the North. Right? All they had to do is keep in the defensive and wait till the North is going to drain its resources, and wait until the North, the population in the North wearies of the war. All right. Obviously, you already have the draft rights of '63, things like that. So there are movements within the North that are against the war and just rather see the South break off. All right. But what happens is that the leaders of the South, Jefferson Davis and such, they need the support of Europe, and they need to show Europe that they can win and handle themselves. So they try to invade the North, and then you have the Battle of Antietam. There's no decisive victory there. Then Gettysburg, they get ran out. So that kind of really scares Europe away from thinking that they can win and sustain a victory. Okay. Thirdly, they found cheaper cotton in Egypt and India. All right, so therefore they're not going to worry necessarily about the South's cotton because they could get it elsewhere. All right. Now, how is there still tension between Europe and the Union? Well, there's an event early on in the war called the Trent Affair, where diplomats from the South are intercepted by Union forces, and their whole purpose was to go and get support from England. Right, and so this is going to cause some tension between Europe and the Union, just for the fact that they're inviting the South there. Also, England is going to sell old warships to the South, which also creates some tension. In the long run, England will pay the North $15.5 million for damages caused by those warships. Alright, so England kind of realizes that it shouldn't have gotten involved, and they'll try to make things better. Sorry. All right. Now, the last section of this right here, we're almost done here. How is the battlefield combat reflected in the changes of technology? Understand the machine gun is greatly detrimental to the charge in line formation. All right. So early in the war, they pretty much line up at each other and go straight forward, and they maybe stop, load their muzzles and stuff like that. But as the machine gun starts coming about, the Gatling gun, it's really going to change the way that battles are going to be fought. Battles are going to become more defensive. All right, and in fact, the beginning of trench warfare begins at the later part of the Civil War, especially like Petersburg and battles like that. All right. Um, Obviously, yeah, barbed wire is kind of new here. It begins at the end of the war. It really is used for cattle ranching and will be incorporated in, I believe, 65. But then you have the machine gun. You have the rifle. Um, things like that. I'm not really worried to understand that new technology. There is new technology out there. All right. How does the North utilize the new technology? Oh, obviously, we gotta say the iron ships. Now, well, they use the ships for the blockade. Um, but for the most part, the North has control of the industrialization, and so those machine guns, the North is going to definitely have more weapons than the South. Um, and that's going to allow them to take advantage and do well. All right, and it's kind of short and kind of chunky, but some of the stuff is not as important. Like I said, the diplomacy is kind of important. The impact of women definitely is. The Emancipation Proclamation definitely is. But the technology, understand what it was and maybe how it might have changed battles somewhat. Okay, all right.